Hasim Abdullah, Hassan Atimil, Iqbal Muhager, Ismail Rasul, Jajuri Raisa, Jakilan Muslimin, Karon Bainon, Lidasan Mussolini, Loong Don Mustafa, Lorena Jose Ribani, Makaku Abdurauf, Makapaar Abdullah, Makaraya Jamel, Makasalong Marjani, Manguda Dato Kadafe, Mantawil Malik, Mastura Dato Tokaw, Mastura City Shahara, Mawalil Amil Bahar, Mitimbang Dato Midpantaw, Mitmog Rasul, Mujahid Abdul Muhmin, Munoz Hussein, Oranon Soid, Pakasa Mubayda, Pak Abdul Wahab, Pangandaman Nabila Margarita, Ramos Jamila, Rimbang Edrisa Nazer, Sakar Mudayaw, Salendad Said, Sali Al-Shaid, Saliga Romeo, Salik Ali, Sangki Ali, Sani Punduma, Satar Al-Zad, Sema Omar Yasser, Sema Romeo, Sheikh Said, Silongan Aida, Sulaiman Ali, Tago Paisalin, Tan Nabil, Uja Sahi, Ulama Milanyo, Usman Asfar, Yakob Muhammad, UAK Narciso.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum. Mr. Speaker, on the basis of the roll call, out of the 79 members of the Bangsamoro Transition Authority Parliament, 34 were physically responded to the call and 25 MPs responded via Zoom. Mr. Speaker, we have a total of 59 attendees, both physical and virtual. We therefore certify, Mr. Speaker, that there is presence of quorum. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
With 59 members responded to the roll call as certified by the Secretary General, the Chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Honorables, Presiding Officer, Deputy Speaker Zia Alonto, honorable members of the Bangsamoro Transition Authority, visitors, friends, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We proceed to the item on the order of business. We are on item number 6, the reading and approval of journal of the previous session. Mr. Speaker, considering that there is a hard copy of the journal of the previous session, I move to approve the journal number 36. I move to dispense with the reading of journal number 36 of June 18, 23, 24, and 25, 2020 session. And I further move for the approval of the same, Mr. Speaker.
There's a motion to dispense with the reading of the journal of the previous session and to move further for the approval of the same. Is there any objection?
Mr. Speaker.
What is the pleasure of the gentleman from Sulu, MP Mawalin?
Mr. Speaker, this is not an objection. However, I would just like to put forward my comments on the particular journal. Mr. Speaker, I hope that the Secretariat can come up with a standard styling guide, writing style for the journal writing, Mr. Speaker, because there were some Substantially, my name is in the journal, and I would like to call the attention of the secretariat because some of the comments that I made during this particular deliberation, Mr. Speaker, were taken out of context. Hence, my question, Mr. Speaker, is are we not allowed to put in the journal a direct quote from the members of parliament, considering that other jurisdictions, other parliaments in the world uh, uses the style of verbatim quotation. So, ang worry ko lang po dito, the Secretariat, contextualize nila yung mga sinasabi ng mga MPs without actually putting the direct quote of what that a particular particular member of parliament had said during the deliberation. So there were some typographical, grammatical error that I would like for the Secretariat to address. For example, I said in a particular section of the journal, I said far flung areas, but it was written instead as far plunk area. So I hope that these quotes are attributed to me. So magmumukha pong parang sorry, but baka magmukhang bloopers tayo dito. And of course, this is also our way of uh, uh, preserving an institutional memory of this parliament after our term, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. We take note of the remarks of the gentleman from Bulu and remind the Secretariat to improve on the documentation of the comments being
Mr.
expressed on
Speaker,
the floor.
may I
Is
put
there
that
any
in
question in your remarks?
Can I put that into a motion, Mr. Speaker, that the Secretariat submit a standard writing style for the journal of this parliament, Mr.
Before we entertain the motion of the gentleman from below, there's a standing motion to approve first
Yes, yes.
and dispense with the reading of the previous session. If there's no objection, then we will act on the motion of the majority leader. Any objection to dispense with the reading of the journal of the previous session into approve?
None.
Okay, the motion is approved. There's a motion by MP Mawalil. MP Mawalil, may you kind enough to again repeat your motion.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move that the Secretariat clarify the issue on how they conduct or write the journal of the Parliament. Is there a writing style? So I direct the Secretariat, members of Secretariat concerned with the journal to submit a report perhaps to this representation, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
So there's a motion for the Secretariat to make a standard styling in the presentation of the journal. Is there any objection to that? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Mr. Speaker.
Majority Leader, what's the pleasure of the gentleman from Kabuntalan?
Yes, I was supposed to continue the conversation that was already raised by MP Mawalid. Mr. Speaker.
Yes, please proceed.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, I think the Secretariat and the rules would have to be clarified as to whether you would like to proceed with the establishment of a proceedings of the Parliament. Because right now, what they are using is the journal method, which is the third person, where they are reporting in third person what has transpired, and it may not be that faithful. But I think maybe the Committee on Rules, with the motion that was earlier raised by the Honorable Mawalil, we could further explore whether we apply we use the two methods: the proceedings, and then the journal reporting. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. We take note of the manifestation of the gentleman from Kabuntalan. Perhaps this is one of the issues that would be discussed in the committee level by the Committee on Rules. Majority Leader?
Yes, Mr. Presiding Officer, Mr. Speaker, we proceed to the item number 7 of the order of business. We are now on the proposed resolutions. May we request the Secretary General to read the first proposed resolution, Mr. Speaker? The title and the author.
Please, Secretary General is directed to read the title of the proposed resolution 380 and to read the authors.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, on proposed resolution number 380, entitled Resolution Recommending the Ministry of Environment, Natural Resources, and Energy, MENRE, the availment of the solar lighting system as a source of electricity for the remote areas of 5 provinces of Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, BARM, authored by the Honorable MP Sultan Idrisa Haji Nasir Rimbang, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I move to refer this to the Committee on Environment, Natural Resources, and Energy.
There's a motion to refer PR 380 to the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources. There are no objection. Hearing none, PR 380 is referred to the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources.
May we request the Secretary General to read the next proposed resolution?
Secretary General is requested to read the title of PR 381 and the names of the authors.
Mr. Speaker, second proposed resolution number 381 is entitled A Resolution Urging the Bangsamoro Government through the Ministry of Basic and Higher Education to initiate the integration of the school curriculum in all colleges and universities, both public and private, within Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, authored by the Honorables MP Narciso Koyu Eki, MP Aida M. Silungan, MP Ahmad Abbas, and MP Alim Ibrahim D. Ali. Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I move to refer this to the Committee on Basic, Higher, and Technical Education, Mr. Speaker.
There's a motion to refer PR number 381 to the Committee on Basic, Higher, and Technical Education. Is there any objection? That's been seconded. Proposed Resolution 381 is hereby referred to the Committee on Basic, Higher, and Technical Education.
Mr. Speaker, may we request the Secretary General to read the next proposed resolution?
Secretary General is requested to read PR 382 and the authors.
On third proposed resolution, Mr. Speaker, number 382 is entitled Resolution Urgently Directing the Ministry of Health to provide and present a report to the Bangsamoro Parliament regarding the assessment, plan, and program on the distributions of COVID-19 vaccine, authored by the Honorables MP Attorney Maysara Huja Dandamun Latif, co-authored the Honorables MP Basit S. Abbas, MP Ibrahim D. Ali, MP Abdullah A. Ahang, MP Dr. Susana Anayatin, MP Musa K.S. Jamla, MP Abdullah B. Hasim, MP Rasul E. Ismail, MP Bainon J. Caron, MP Hussein Munoz, MP Suwaib Oranon, MP Abdul Wahab Pak, MP Nabila Margarita Pangandaman, MP Jamila D. Ramos, MP Alshade A. Sali, MP Romeo C. Saliga, MP Professor Punduma Bisani, and MP Aida M. Silungan, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I move to refer this to the Committee on Health.
Mr. Speaker.
There's a motion to
Mr.
refer
Speaker.
PR 382 to
Mr.
which
Speaker.
committee? Yes,
Committee on Health.
what's the pleasure of the gentleman from Kabutalan?
I would like to seek the reconsideration of the majority floor leader from submitting it for the consideration of the very committee which is peopled by the ministry that is supposed to be directed to provide us a report. I would request the majority floor leader to treat this to move for its treatment as a simple resolution, Mr. Speaker.
Which resolution are we
This
referring?
382, Mr. Speaker.
So instead of referring this to the particular committee, the gentleman from Kabutalan wishes to move to treat PR 382 as simple resolution. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, and move it to the business of the day, Mr. Speaker.
What's the pleasure of the majority leader?
Mr. Speaker, I think we should refer this to the Committee on Health so that they can discuss on these particular issues, Mr. Speaker, considering that the issue of vaccines, COVID-19, has to do with the implementation of the government of the day projects, Mr. Speaker.
I understand.
Yes, I will allow the gentleman from Kabutalan to further his remarks. Yes, MP
Yes, Mr. Speaker,
Abuluto.
I understand the concern of the majority floor leader. However, what the resolution simply seeks is to request, if not direct, the Ministry of Health to provide us an update on the matter of our COVID plans, programs, including our vaccine distribution plan. I think it is a very, very straightforward request, pleading of this Parliament, requesting the Ministry to simply provide a report, an update. So that's That's a very straightforward question. I don't think we need to discuss it into the committee. It's simply rather for this August body to say yes or no, or whether we are requesting the Ministry of Health to immediately update this August body, Mr. Speaker.
Yes,
Majority
Mr.
Leader.
Speaker, the next proposed resolution has the same title on the same uh, intention, Mr. Speaker. So before we can decide on the particular issue of MP Suharto Ambuluto, may we request first the Secretary General to read the next proposed resolution, which has the same title and intention with the
We concur, Mr.
Yes.
Speaker.
So we will direct the Secretary General to
Next
read the
proposal.
succeeding
Yes.
PR number 383 without necessarily acting on the proposal of the gentleman from Kabutalan. Secretary General is requested to read PR number 383, the title and the names of the authors.
Mr. Speaker, on proposed resolution number 383 is entitled, "A resolution respectfully urging the Ministry of Health to prepare a vaccination program plan ahead of the public distributions of the COVID-19 vaccines in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, ensuring equitable distribution to lower income groups and to the most vulnerable families." Authored by the Honorable MP Abdullah B. Hashim, co-authors the Honorables MP Romeo C. Saliga, MP Bainon J. Caron, MP Basis Janati Mimbantas Abbas, MP Attorney Maysara Dandamun Latif, MP Attorney Paisalin Tago, MP Dr. Susana Anayatin, MP Engineer Don Mustafa Luong, MP Attorney Omar Yasir Sema, MP Princess Maleha Kandao, MP Engineer Mujib Abu, MP Muslima Asmawil, MP Muhammad P. Batu, MP Dr. Zulkainin Abbas, MP Abdulaziz Jordan, Ismail, MP Abdullah A. Ahang, MP Jamila Disimban Ramos, MP Punduma Sani, MP Ibrahim Di Ali, MP Musa K.S. Jamla, MP Attorney Rasul Imit Mug Jr., MP Nabila Margarite Pangandaman, and MP Rasul Ismail, Mr. Speaker.
Majority Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, after reading the two proposed resolutions, Mr. Speaker, it is my humble opinion, Mr. Speaker, that these two proposed resolutions can be consolidated to each other, but this should be referred to the Committee on Health to discuss further the issues concerning the as mentioned in the proposed resolution, Mr. Speaker.
So
Mr.
there's a
Speak-
motion.
Mr.
There's a
Speaker.
motion to refer these two committees to the Committee on Health and Committee on Health. Is there any objection? The
Mr.
gentleman from Kamutalan, would
Mr.
you pursue
Speaker.
your proposal?
Mr. Speaker. Mr.
Objection,
Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, who's that?
Mr. Speaker.
Yes, the member joining us in the Zoom. Kindly, Secretary General, Secretariat,
Objection po,
kindly
Mr. Speaker.
flash.
Nabil Tan.
The Deputy
MP Abbas
Speaker.
din po.
Deputy Speaker Nabil Tan is recognized.
May we have a qualification of the motion of the majority leader that the Committee on Health will give utmost priority. While it may be referred to the committee, it should not linger and become a Mona Lisa. There should be action agad. We should act on that immediately because this is very urgent.
Yes, Mr.
But
Speaker.
I agree with you that there's need to consolidate these two resolutions because it deals on the same subject matter.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
So that's just my suggestion if the Honorable Majority Leader will agree.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
What's the pleasure of the gentleman?
I
Yes,
submit with
Majority
the
Leader.
proposal of MP Nabil Tan, Mr. Speaker, that the Committee on Health should give priority with this two proposed resolutions, Mr.
Mr. Speaker.
and to report
Mr.
them back
Speaker.
immediately to this plenary body, Mr. Speaker.
There was a prior motion.
Yes, Mr. I move to amend my prior motion with the amendment said that with the request with the Committee on Health to immediately act on this particular two resolutions and consolidate them.
Hello,
And
Mike,
I
test, Mike,
move that
test.
this be back to the plenary for immediate approval.
Mr. Speaker.
Before we act on the
Mr.
motion,
Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
there was already the presiding
Mr.
officer.
Speaker.
recognize the gentleman from Kabutalan who requested.
MP Abbas, Mr. Speaker, may we respectfully recognize MP Zulkarnain Abbas, the Deputy Minister of the Minister of Health, Mr. Speaker.
The Deputy
he is in
Minister,
Zoom, Mr.
the
Speaker.
Deputy
Speaker.
Minister, Deputy Minister MP Abbas, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I would like to emphasize, I would like to clarify that the resolution already, we have already finished or crafted our plan on how to roll out the COVID-19 vaccination. So if it pleases your honor, I move that this resolution be treated as a simple resolution so that I can present to the body what our plans for COVID-19 vaccination rollout is.
So there's a, so
Mr.
there was,
Speaker.
wait for a while. So the earlier motion of the gentleman from Kabuntalan is being supported by the motion of the Deputy Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, let me clarify
yes.
first, Mr. Speaker. First, Mr. Speaker, I think we don't have any argument that the two resolutions be consolidated. So we second the minority seconds the motion of the majority floor leader on the consolidation, on that motion alone first. So I think you would have to make a ruling, Mr. Speaker, on the motion of the majority floor leader
We
for
will-
the consolidation.
Yes, we will act on the motion of the majority leader to consolidate these two resolutions. So there's a motion to consolidate PR 382 and 383. Is there any objection?
I second the motion.
Hearing none,
Second the motion.
the motion is approved. As to the referral and to treat this resolution, Majority Leader, what is your pleasure?
Objection
Yes,
on
Mr.
that.
Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Session
The distinguished
suspended.
Minority
Minority
Leader,
Leader.
you're recognized.
Yes,
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
Speaker. Yes, yes. Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Floor Leader. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As to the second motion on the floor, with respect to whether the consolidated motions will be referred to the Committee on Health or be considered as a simple resolution and therefore be moved to the business of the day, I second the proposition of the Deputy Minority Floor Leader, MP Suharto Ambolodo, Mr. Speaker, and also the pronouncements of the good gentleman from Maguindanao, MP Zulkarnain Abbas, the doctor from Maguindanao. It is a simple resolution, Mr. Speaker, because it only calls for the Ministry of Health to report on the matters that are required therein with respect to COVID-19, including the vaccination plan. There is nothing to discuss at the Committee on Health level, Mr. Speaker. The report will be done the moment that we pass this. It is just a manifestation of the sentiment of the whole Bangsamoro Transition Authority saying that we need to listen to the MOH on their report with respect to COVID-19, including the vaccination plan. So I move, Mr. Speaker, that these consolidated resolutions be moved to the business of the day and be considered as a simple resolution, Mr. Speaker, so that we don't waste any more time, Mr. Speaker, discussing this at the level of the Committee on Health. It's just, we're not yet at that level, Mr. Speaker. It's just a resolution requesting very kindly that the Ministry of Health would make a report to the Parliament with respect to its COVID-19 vaccination plan and the COVID-19 response. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I so move.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, the purpose I withdrawing my motion, Mr. Speaker, precisely is to hear the side of the Minister of Health. Then considering that after the Deputy Minister of Health has already been spoken on the particular issues, Mr. Speaker, and he is in the proper authority to speak on the status of the Minister of Health, Mr. Speaker, I agree with the proposal of MP Deputy Minister Zulkarnain Abbas to treat this as a full resolution. Precisely, Mr. Speaker, that is the reason why I am referring this to the Committee on Health, because I am giving respect to the Ministry of Health to hear their side regarding these issues, considering that the MP Zulkarnain has already been said in the last in the Zoom, Mr. Speaker, that there is already a plan. So I agree with I will withdraw my motion to treat this as to refer this to the committee on rule, but I move to refer this to the committee to the business for the day and be treated as a simple resolution, Mr.
So
Speaker.
there's a motion to treat PR 383 as consolidated as simple resolution. Is there any objection? In fact, it has been seconded. The motion is approved.
Mr. Speaker,
The
Mr. Speaker,
PR 382 and 383 is now included in the business. I'm sorry, the business for the day. Yes, what is the pleasure of the Deputy Speaker, MP Nabiltan?
may I know if the Deputy Minister can is ready to to share the report, the Ministry of Health's report to the plenary now, today? If
Yes,
they are
sir.
ready, it's most welcome. And I thought that they needed time, but the consolidation should be done now in few minutes.
Mr.
So
Speaker.
if they're ready, that's most welcome also. That's I cannot agree more on the urgency of the situation. So thank you very much. If you are ready, please.
Thank you. Yes,
The
what's the
manifestation,
pleasure of the
kasi
gentleman
manifestation.
from Kabuntalan?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Majority Pro Leader. Two matters. One, we simply are to consider our request. We are still to consider the request. We may not require them to conduct the report now, here and now. We are simply to consider our resolution requesting for them to submit and prepare and submit a report, which they have already prepared. Second, Mr. Speaker, Brother Majority Pro Leader, if you will allow, the entire minority would like to co-sponsor on these consolidated resolutions.
Anyway, we will act on these resolutions after we have go through the agenda of today's session. I believe the
Mr.
next
Speaker.
item. I believe the next item is the period of
Mr. Speaker.
amendment for the Civil Service Code. Majority Leader.
Yes, may we proceed now to the next item in the order of business. We are on the item number 8, first stages of bills. May we request the Secretary General to read the first stage bill number or Parliament Bill number 78.
The Secretary General is requested to read the title of Parliament Bill number 78 and to read the name of the authors.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, on PTA Parliament Bill number 78 is entitled An Act Establishing a Bangsamoro Fisheries Development Authority or BAFDA, authored by the Honorables Attorney Jose Iribani Lorena, MP Parliament Speaker Attorney Ali Pangalian Balindong, MP Nabil Eitan, MP Paisalin Tago, and MP Amil Bahar Mawalin. Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, this is a private member bill, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, may we proceed to item number 11, unfinished business. This is the committee report number 53, Mr. Speaker. This is related to PTA Cabinet Bill number 59, entitled Bangsamoro Civil Service Code. The parliamentary status of this bill, Mr. Speaker, is we are on the opening period of interpellation and debate, which was deferred last January 28, 2021. May we request the proponent, Mr. Speaker, MP Raisa Jajuri and MP Ana Pasman and MP Vaida Pakasan to be the one to will be the interpellators, will be the
Mr. Speaker.
defend this
Mr.
MPs.
Speaker,
interpellating, Mr. Speaker.
The MPs Jajuri, Pasman, and Pakasam are recognized and they are to
Mr.
defend.
Speaker, before we proceed,
So what's the pleasure of the gentleman from Bulo, Sulu? Deputy Speaker Tan.
before, thank you, MP Zia, Deputy Speaker Zia. before we proceed, may I be clarified on the comment of the majority leader on the filed creation of the BFDA, that it is a private bill? What now if it is a private bill?
Yeah, yes,
What
Mr.
is the action? Will it be referred
No,
to the proper committee for deliberation, or it will just there will be no action on it? What is the action?
yes,
May
Mr.
I be
Speaker.
clarified?
Under the rules of the Parliament of debate, Mr. Speaker, the first stage of bills is just the reading of the title and the authors and the number of the particular bill, and then thereafter, Mr. Speaker, there is no action in that, and thereafter we will proceed to the second stage of bills, which the proponent will have
Okay.
a sponsorship speech on the general
Okay.
objective
Thank
of the bill, Mr. Speaker. So I'm
Thank you,
encouraging
Majority Leader.
MP
Thank you.
Jose Lorena to immediately schedule this bill on second stage so that we can refer it thereafter to the appropriate committee, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Thank you,
Yes.
Mr. Speaker.
Should we open first,
Yes,
Majority Leader?
yes.
Should we
I
open
move
the
to open the period of debate and interpellation, Mr. Speaker.
period of debate and interpellation is hereby open.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Minister Jajuri, MP Basman, and Deputy Minister Pakasim are recognized to defend
Yes, may we respectfully
the BTA Cabinet Bill number 59, the Bangsamoro based Civil Service Code.
may we respectfully recognize in the following order MP Baintanang Patuan, MP Rasmit Mog, MP Attorney Ambuluto, and MP Ali Sanki. In that order, Mr. Speaker.
We start with the lady English Deputy Minority Floor Leader, Honorable Ampatuan, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Mr. Speaker, if you allow me, I prepared the PowerPoint presentation just to guide us on our clarifications and perhaps recommendations on how to improve and how to level off on the contents of the Bangsamoro Civil Service Code, Mr. Speaker.
How many slides are we talking here, MP Patuan?
Just few slides. Actually, more than 20, but I will not elaborate on the other. Just to show you.
Can you go straight to the salient points?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I have actually two files given to the Secretariat. The second file is about markings of the concerns I raised in this PowerPoint presentation. So there are actually two files in the Secretariat right now, Mr. Speaker. May I proceed, Mr. Speaker?
Yes, please proceed.
Yeah, as a basis and just to give us a real framework, and it's stated in the Civil Service Code that among all other things, Section 39, Article 7 of the Organic Law mandates the Bangsamoro government shall enact a civil service law, and therefore we are discussing right now this Civil Service Code, provided that it shall be in accordance with existing national laws. This is a very, very powerful provision, Mr. Speaker, as stated in the BOF. It says further that in case of conflict with national laws, the Constitution and existing national civil service laws, rules, and regulation shall prevail. Mr. Speaker, the reason I'm pointing out this, Mr. Speaker, it should be the basis, it should be the framework, it should be the guidelines of all the things that we should discuss in the succeeding deliberation, Mr. Speaker. Just for the record, Mr. Speaker. Next slide, please. Mr. Speaker, I took some time to study the relationship of the administrative code with the civil service code, with the education code, and the local government code. Although on the education and local government code, Mr. Speaker, I put it in there, red colors, because we have yet to see the real contents of the codes. But Mr. Speaker, among in the universe of all these codes, Mr. Speaker, the mother code actually is the administrative code because it provides the structure of the entire bureaucracy, Mr. Speaker. And what the civil service code provides is that it defines the standards, it defines the procedures, it defines the scope of the civil service, Mr. Speaker. So I think this is a basic framework that we should have in mind. I don't know if we share the same idea, but this is how I interpret, Mr. Speaker, as far as I am concerned, regarding these codes that we are mandated to deliver, Mr. Speaker. Next slide, please. Mr. Speaker, there's a provision in the definition of terms, Mr. Speaker, that talks about Madaris education, Mr. Speaker. However, looking at the content of the Civil Service Code, Mr. Speaker, it's only Article 80 that talks about Madaris education. And the content of that, Mr. Speaker, is this includes Madaris education as may be defined by the Bangsamoro Education Code, Mr. Speaker. Although it is defined, it is part of the definition of terms, Mr. Speaker, it doesn't provide any other provisions generally in the entire Civil Service Code, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I do not know what is rational, why we define it when in fact it's not provided in the entire document, Mr. Speaker. The next one is very, very minimal, actually, Mr. Speaker. I can forego with that, but there should be an explanation why a Deputy Chief Minister is called as Deputy Chief Minister based on his seniority in age, Mr. Speaker. Next, Mr. Speaker. On the definition of terms also, Mr. Speaker, we use the word agency to refer to all these bodies, ministry, bureau, offices. And it's also included there the word committee, Mr. Speaker, which for me, it's not part of it. But my idea here, Mr. Speaker, will be explained in the next slide, Mr. Speaker. Also, okay, if you try to look at the entire document, Mr. Speaker, you will see in every page of the document, perhaps, the word Civil Service Commission, CSC, CSC for BARM, CSC, BARM Civil Service. Mr. Speaker, I think we need to check on the consistency, Mr. Chief Speaker, because we are talking of one and the same thing. When we talk about Civil Service Commission, it's the Commission, it's the CSC. But just for consistency purposes, Mr. Speaker, we might as well use one common word to denote. If it's commission, then it refers to Civil Service Commission as defined actually in the definition of terms. But what bothers me most, Mr. Speaker, is the word CSC for BARM and CSC BARM, which actually is commonly used in the Civil Service Code, which may refer to the same thing, but we have to decide what really is the civil service for ARM or its civil service BARM. Again, this is part of the consistency check, Mr. Speaker. And in the entire document, Mr. Speaker, we use this several times. Agency, big letter and a small letter, ministries, offices, or agencies, ministries or offices, ministry, agency, ministry or agency, Bangsamoro ministries, offices, and agencies, department or agency, office or bureau, which actually mean the same thing, Mr. Speaker. And just for consistency purposes, Mr. Speaker, we might as well resort to using the agency as defined in the first part of the definition of terms, Mr. Speaker. That's my recommendation, Mr. Speaker. Next. Also on the nomenclature about Bangsamoro, Bangsamoro autonomous government. Actually, the other items I can understand why we use those terms, but just the same, just for consistency, we need to reconcile the use of these terms. But what is not clear to me is item A, Bangsamoro Autonomous Government, which is used in the Civil Service Code once or twice, which is entirely different from the other items, Mr. Speaker. Next. Also, this is very important, Mr. Speaker. May I ask the proponent, what is the general rule that we have adopted as far as number is concerned? Do we put wordings preceding the numerical figure, or do we use 1 to 9 with wordings and above 10 with no wording? We should be very specific on this because in the entire document, we use 2 things or even 3 things, no? A combination of the 3, actually. On acronyms, Mr. Speaker, and actually this is my concerns here is just to put together, to improve further. This is not to pinpoint all the mistakes, all the errors, but my idea here is to improve really the Civil Service Code, Mr. Speaker. On acronyms, there were acronyms that were used but not defined in the first use, no? For example, SRMO. So, ibig sabihin, may mga assumption na tayo na alam natin ano ibig sabihin ng SRMO, alam natin na ibig sabihin ng MBHC, pero dineretso na natin, no? NAPOLCOM, COMELEC, of course, lahat tayo alam niyan, but just the same, as part of the rules, basic rules, kailangan natin i-define muna, no? But there are also acronyms that were repeatedly defined, no? Like local government units, DOCCs, and SUCs. All these things, Mr. Speaker, I mark it in the second document that I gave it to the Secretariat for the proponent to consider, Mr. Speaker. On the use of specific RA, my point, or Republic Act number, we are not also consistent, no? And while the lawyers know what are the specific titles of these laws, but our readers later on will not do not know what are the titles of these RAs that we pointed out in the code, Mr. Speaker. Next. On Mr. Speaker, this is my appreciation as far as the Madaris teacher is concerned, Mr. Speaker. While the administrative code define the framework or the structure, the Civil Service Code define the standards of civil servant, but excluding the qualification standards for Madaris teachers, Mr. Speaker. And it's actually a concern, Mr. Speaker, because based on the framework that I raised earlier, the Civil Service Code is supposed to provide the standard, the qualifications of the civil servants, Mr. Speaker. And for that matter, Mr. Speaker, that includes the Madaris teachers, Mr. Speaker. Okay, next slide, please. These are some of my notes about the difference about the function on the functions of CSC versus CSC BARM. CSC when we refer to national, and CSC for BARM or CSC BARM when we refer to the field office. We can forego this, Mr. Speaker, just for the note of the proponents. But my next slide, please. My concern is, I think somewhere in the document, we need to define really what is the major function of the CSC BARM. CSC BARM or CSC for BARM, and to have a clear distinction with the CSC national, Mr. Speaker. That's a proposal, Mr. Speaker. Next. And for me, there are confused provisions, Mr. Speaker. Commission or CSC for BARM, because it says in some of the provisions, Mr. Speaker, that either of the two will do. But if you are the client, Mr. Speaker, if you're given the two choices, Mr. Speaker, where will you go? Mr. Speaker. So for me, there's somehow a confusion on this. And I think if the CSC for BARM is the field office of the CSC National, we should have the first line or the front line as the CSC for BARM, Mr. Speaker, rather than going to the national directly and leaving the CSC BARM as a frontline service provider, Mr. Speaker. Next. This is also the same. CSC BARM or the commission. Next. Also another provision. For me, it's a confused provision. Next. Also, and on Article 168, this is a proposed amendment by some members of the Parliament because it's marked as underlined. For me, it should be deleted because this is not applicable to the career civil servants, but this applies to the members of the Parliament and the Cabinet. Next. On the Bangsamoro Director General, Mr. Speaker, I have actually a very strong reservation on this, Mr. Speaker, because at the national level, Mr. Speaker, when we talk about Director General qualification, Mr. Speaker, it's equivalent to a cabinet position. And if it simply translate it in BARM by putting the word Bangsamoro and becomes a career position, Mr. Speaker, I don't know if we are talking about consistency already, consistency as far as this provision is concerned, Mr. Speaker. Next. Yeah, this one, Mr. Speaker, there is a need to connect Article 26, Item 12 with an Article 127, Mr. Speaker. And there are also provision on our Article 26, Item 13 that talks about placement committee. It came out of nowhere. It is not defined in any parts of the code, but it came out of nowhere and it's in there without any other explanation, Mr. Speaker. There's also a clarification about the use of DBM. If this pertains to the alt form, that's why we use the word, we use the DBM and CSC form, Mr. Speaker. Next. Yeah, this one, Mr. Speaker, while in some provisions of the code talks about first level, second level positions, and we don't have a third level position, but somewhere in the documents, Mr. Speaker, as far as consistency is concerned, Mr. Speaker, we talk about third level position. However, in Article 113, I think, it doesn't recognize the third level position. So there's really an inconsistency as far as the provisions are concerned, Mr. Speaker. Next. Yeah, just the same. We also use the third level position. But this doesn't mean that I do not support the third level position, because in my next slide, this one is about minimal, but it talks about, this one talks about the CSC, but out of nowhere, lumabas yung CSC BARM Director. Hindi ko alam ano ang, bakit parang nagmilagro na lumabas kaagad yung CSC BARM Director from the entire discussion, pero hindi naman siya nabanggit kahit saan. No? Next. Okay, this one is a concern raised by many actually call my attention about this as to the eligibility for the Sharia, because we're talking here of two standards, pre and post the year that is mentioned here, no? Prior to January 2014, it's only a the eligibility is applicable only to first level position. But when you took and passed your exam after January 2014, you're qualified to first and second level position, which actually leads to a question: what's the difference between the two? What's in January 14 that makes the exam special than the other, Mr. Speaker? Next. Yeah, this one is about the incentives. I support having incentives for those deserving career and civil servants, but I do not support giving them too much. Too much. For me, all those in yellow are too much. No, imagine you give them, yeah, bonus can be, but not. Citations actually is a very good acknowledgement of or recognition of incentives and rewards for those who have performed, but giving them directorship in government-owned and controlled corporations, local and foreign scholarship grants, paid vacation, and they shall likewise be automatically promoted to the next higher position with a commensurate salary suitable to their qualifications. Tapos may sinabi pa, said position, pag hindi daw available, shall be included in the next budget, the office in the next Bangsamoro General Appropriations Law. I think while we do recognize all those performing individuals, it can be done in other forms, Mr. Speaker. This one is too much for me, Mr. Speaker. Next. This one is on the jurisdiction about cases filed against civil servants, Mr. Speaker. But what is not clear in the code, Mr. Speaker, is which office has the authority to, which has the jurisdiction over cases filed on officials like the Deputy Chief Minister, the ministers, chairpersons, commissioners, and other personals of Bangsamoro Human Rights Commission, because it's not provided in the Civil Service Code, Mr. Speaker. Next. Actually, this is my last slide, Mr. Speaker. Second to the last slide. And actually, of all the things that I've had mentioned earlier, Mr. Speaker, if you ask me, if I forgo all those things, I forgo all these things in favor of this concern, Mr. Speaker. Because for me, Mr. Speaker, Section 39, Article 7 of mandates that as I articulated in the first slide, Mr. Speaker, that Section 39, Article 7 of the Organic Law mandates that the Bangsamoro government shall enact a civil service law, provided that it shall be in accordance with existing national laws. This, for me, Mr. Speaker, Article 10 and Article 13, which talks about the requirements for career executive civil service eligibility shall not apply to third-level positions in the BARM, is not really acceptable, Mr. Speaker. We are not subordinate to the national. We are at par actually with as far as competence is concerned. So we will not sacrifice what we have. There are lots of Bangsamoro who are professionals, who have gained CESO eligibility, who have gained third-level eligibilities. Let us not neglect them. Let us recognize them, Mr. Speaker. And this, Mr. Speaker, is not consistent with the provision under the Civil Service Code that we bank on the credible merit and fitness system as articulated in Article 3 of the Civil Service Code, Mr. Speaker. With that, Mr. Speaker, my strong reservation about Article 13, I register it because if I'm not here during the votation, Mr. Speaker, I register my strong reservation as far as Article 13 is concerned, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, MP Ampatuan, for that detailed presentation. There are questions in the presentation of the Honorable Ampatuan. MP Ampatuan, would you like the proponent to respond one by one to the questions in your presentation? MP Ampatuan. MP Ampatuan, would you like the sponsor to respond directly to the questions in your presentation? Because some of the presentation,
Yes, Mr.
yes,
Speaker,
some of the
actually,
slides, yes, some of the slides are to be taken up in the period of amendment, because I believe that's the intention of those slides are indeed
yes,
to
Mr.
amend
Speaker.
the current draft of the civil service. But there are questions in your presentation. Would you like the
Um,
proponent to respond to them?
yeah, Mr. Speaker, actually, I'm expecting a response coming from the proponent, Mr. Speaker. That's why I enumerated all my concerns, Mr. Speaker.
Can you write them down, because there are quite many questions in your presentation. But I would like to ask Minister Jajuri, did you follow the presentation of
We
MP?
can discuss one by one, Mr. Speaker, if they want, Mr. Speaker. I need some response on
All
some
right,
of the slides, Mr. Speaker.
MP Jajuri, you're
Yes.
recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Mr. Speaker, I was not able to take down everything that was flashed, but I can start responding to those that I have taken note of.
Yes. Are you comfortable, Minister Jajuri, using the slide of MP Apatuan so that you also be guided in terms of supplying answers to the questions raised by Honorable Ampatuan?
Mr. Speaker, I think some of the items or the issues raised, particularly the nomenclature, I can already answer that without
All right.
going through all the different slides.
All right. Okay,
So we-
you're recognized, please.
Yes.
Proceed.
So, Mr. Speaker, we recognize that there can be improvement in the draft by making sure that we use consistent nomenclature. So the idea, Mr. Speaker, for example, for Civil Service Commission, aside from, well, except for the first part where we introduced the Civil Service Commission, I think in the definition, we refer to it as the commission. So all other nomenclature or reference to the Civil Service Commission using CSC or CSC particularly can be changed to commission. So we agree on that. But for the CSC for BARM or Civil Service Commission for BARM, there is a specific memorandum circular that was issued by the Civil Service Commission in the BARM. While the BOL says that there shall be a Civil Service Commission -BARM, Civil Service Commission actually issued a memorandum circular clarifying that the regional office or the unit that will cover the BARM as its jurisdiction shall be called CSC for BARM. And this is provided in it's a memorandum circular, right?
Okay,
Okay, in the definition of terms, specifically, it's on page 4, Mr. Speaker. So we are just abiding by that memorandum circular. So it's the regional office of the Civil Service Commission that has jurisdiction over the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. So the the memorandum circular is CSCMC 03 series of 2020, Mr. Speaker, so that all references to CSC-BARM should be changed to CSC for BARM. I think that was the idea in the level of the committee that it was an omnibus motion to change CSC-BARM to CSC for BARM. However, it was not reflected in the version that we have now. So that's CSC for BARM will be used rather than CSC-BARM. Okay. Madaris Education, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, may I hear some comments on the use of the agency,
Okay.
ministry offices?
Mr.
Because they were used several times with different forms.
Okay. For this, Mr. Speaker, we will have to maybe review the specific provisions, particularly if there is reference to the department, because that may refer to the national agency, a department of the national government. But for the in the level of the Bangsamoro, we would rather use ministries, offices, or agencies so that it will cover both ministries, commissions, and so forth. So we can also
Mr.
change
Speaker, looking at the definition of terms, Mr. Speaker, what was indicated there is agency, which embraces all the other instrumentalities, Mr. Speaker. So, just the same, if we decide that we use agency to serve as generic term for all, and then let's be consistent on its use. If it's not, it's all right with me, provided that we are consistent in the uh, uh, first word that we use with the other words that we use in the succeeding pages.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, we are amenable to any amendment. However, just to emphasize the point I raised earlier, I think we need to go through what specific provision, particularly for department.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Actually, I mark all those words in the second document that I gave to the Secretariat, Mr. Speaker.
Please proceed, MP
Okay.
Jajuri. So you have MP Honorable Ampatuan. You have submitted your proposals for amendment based on this to the Secretariat.
Yeah, I marked them, but I cannot edit because it's a PDF file, unfortunately. But I have other copy here with my markings of the proposal, Mr. Speaker. I can give it to my colleagues, Mr. Speaker, later on. I'll just
Yeah,
check.
we will
Mr.
request on the Honorable Ampatuan to
Yeah,
provide
Mr. Speaker.
the proponent the specific nomenclature in which specific articles was she referring to, so that we can also be guided, proponent can also be guided whether to accept or to reject such proposals. Minister Jejuri, please proceed.
Yes. With respect to the use of Bangsamoro autonomous government, we are
Next slide,
amenable
please.
to being more consistent with the
Next slide, please.
nomenclature in other provisions so that we use only Bangsamoro government.
Thank you.
And that can be introduced in the period of amendments, Mr. Speaker.
Next.
Okay, as to the numbering, I think that's also just a lapse in the style. The idea is really to have words, numbers in words, and then numbers in figures.
Numbers.
Whether it's 1 to 9 or above 9. So we are also amenable to changing provisions that are not consistent with that, Mr. Speaker.
Anyway, we will introduce the proper amendments in the period of amendment.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. As well as the acronyms. Again, this is just a lapse in the style, and we are okay with introduction of the full name of the entity or the idea, and then using the acronym thereafter. Same with references to Republic Acts. We are agreeable to being consistent in the style when we refer to a national law, Mr. Speaker.
Can we proceed to the next slide?
Okay. With respect to the qualification standards for Madaris teachers, Mr. Speaker, our proposal, as provided in the committee report, is to refer that matter to the education code. Because as the good interpolator points out, we as much as possible we want to be consistent with national laws, but the civil service can have special rules for specific groups of employees, such as Madaris teachers. And I think if you put the qualification standards for Madaris teachers in the education code, that gives the mandate to the Civil Service Commission and the CSC 4 BARM to implement the provision in the education code rather than providing in the Civil Service Code itself that there will be a separate set of qualification standards for a certain group of people. So that's the rationale for Article 78, Mr. Speaker.
In other words, you are preparing the Civil Service Code insofar as the Madaris education system is concerned based on what the education code will spell out covering the issue on Madaris. Is the Honorable Ampatuan, would that be that explanation, Ampatuan, are you amenable to that?
Actually,
Are you clarified?
Mr. Speaker, I'm clarified, but I'm not comfortable with the word coordinate. Shall coordinate with the CSC farm. It's rather a weak word. When we talk about proper coordination with appropriate institution, so maybe in the period of amendments we can find a better arrangement or rephrasing for Article 78.
Very well. Minister Jajuri. Yeah, can we go to the next slide, please?
I think it's still nomenclature, but no. This is, I am quite confident, Mr. Speaker, that when we make references to the Civil Service Commission, CSC, or Commission, it is based on a law or which also makes reference to the Civil Service Commission, meaning the National Civil Service Commission. And when we make references to CSC for BARM or CSC-BARM, which as I said should be CSC for BARM, it also pertains to certain powers or duties or obligations of the regional office called the CSC for BARM as opposed to the commission. So again, I cannot comment on a general observation. We have to go through each and every provision because these provisions are based on laws, specifically national laws, which also make a distinction between the authority, the responsibility, the powers of the commission and of the regional offices of the Civil Service Commission, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Ampatuan, are you clarified?
Mr. Speaker, on the next slide, Mr. Speaker, my question is, can we identify the major function of the CSC BARM? When we talk about CSC for BARM, what is really the distinction when we say that it's an office or field office for BARM, I think ang tinitingnan ko lang hanggang saan yung power niya. The major powers of the regional office. I think yun yung parang, there's a section that talks about the major powers of the CSC for BARM.
Well, we can look at that, Mr. Speaker. But in the meantime, as I was saying, CSC for BARM is actually the equivalent of a regional office of the CSC. And all the references to CSC for BARM is based on a provision that also makes reference to CSC regional office. So we can do what we can do if the interpellator wishes it. We can collate all the powers mentioned in the bill referring to CSC for BARM and then the commission itself, if that is the desire of the interpolator.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Actually, what I want to see is a distinction between the national and the field office for BARM, Mr. Speaker.
Sige po.
The limitations of the field office, because in the succeeding provisions, Mr. Speaker, it talks about the two. It's either the commission or the CSC for BARM, which actually confuses me, Mr. Speaker.
As I said, Mr. Speaker, the reference to CSC for BARM and reference to CSC or Commission or Civil Service Commission, these are deliberate and these are based on national laws. So when the provision says the employee can go to the Commission or to the CSC for BARM, it's because there's a national law also saying that the employee may appeal to the commission, meaning the national commission, or to the CSC regional office. So there's that option provided by law, and we reflected that also in the Bangsamoro Civil Service Code, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Speaker, this is an opportunity for us to chart our own civil service code that will not cause confusion to our clients, Mr. Speaker. And if we have the way to correct, Mr. Speaker, that as a field office, it's the front line of all the activities, of all the programs and projects of the civil service, Mr. Speaker. I think the idea here is if we put the regional office, that's the front line. Everything that happens on the ground is first resolved, is first taken action by the field office before going to the CSC National. That's my idea, Mr. Speaker. That's why I'm not inclined of using the word commission or CSC for BARM, because for me it confuses the clients, Mr. Speaker.
We
But
can
anyway,
go through
yes.
the specific provision, Mr. Speaker, so that we can look at the national law and see if there is a deviation in that provision of the national law. Because we're just following what is provided in the national law, Mr. Speaker.
Anyway, the points raised by Honorable Ampatuan will be effectively acted upon in the period of amendment once we arrive on that the period of amendment. Can we move to the next slide?
Yeah, this is the one I'm talking, Mr. Speaker, about the use of commission or CSC for BARM. So we can.
Do you have a response to this?
As I said, Mr.
Minister
Speaker, I can look it up. It's Article 49 and 48, Mr. Speaker. Okay, the basis for Article 48, and this is on probationary period. Ay, sorry, hindi pala. Reassignment. Okay. This is based on Section 13, Rule 4, 2017 Ora Ora. Paragraph 4. And I will now read the Ora Ora provision. The employee may appeal the reassignment order within 15 days upon receipt thereof to the Commission or CSC-RO with jurisdiction as provided under specific law if he or she, and then it goes on. So it's based on the Ora Ora, Mr. Speaker. The intention is to give the employee the option of going to the regional office or to the National Civil Service Commission. And we just reflected that in our provision. Same goes for Article 49, which is on detail. Number 5. Again, yes. It's the employee may appeal the detail order within 15 days upon receipt to the CSC, to the Commission, or the CSC General Office. So it's the same, Mr. Speaker. It's reflecting only what the Ora Ora, particularly Section 13, Rule 4, provides.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I've said, Mr. Speaker, if there is a way to correct it, Mr. Speaker, that's why we are legislating our own, Mr. Speaker. And I think this one is more of procedural, Mr. Speaker. We are not violating any law, Mr. Speaker, because these are just guidelines, Mr. Speaker. If we can appeal it to the Commission, that we use the front line, the regional office in any matters relating to regional issues and concerns, Mr. Speaker.
But Mr. Speaker, we do not want to deprive the employee of that option. The option to go to the regional office, which in the BARM is called CSC or BARM, or to the National Commission. That's why we reflected the options in our own Civil Service Code.
Honorable Patuan, should we proceed to the next slide?
Yeah, let's proceed, Mr. Speaker. We leave it to the proponent, Mr. Speaker, because but I mentioned my concern, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Next slide.
I think it's the same.
Next. Article 168, Mr. Speaker.
68.
Is that a proposal to delete a particular section? Maybe Minister Jajuri can provide, we can deal with this proposal later on in the period of amendments.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, but the prohibition. So the proposal is to delete.
That's the proposal. Proposal by deletion.
And the reason is, sorry, I did not catch that.
The reason is that specific provision is applicable to the Chief Minister and Cabinet officials of the Chief Minister, BTA, and Cabinet of the Parliament who are not career position, who are not holding career position, Mr. Speaker.
You can respond, Minister Jaduri. You can
later.
Yes, you can reserve your response later on.
Okay, Mr. Speaker.
Can we move forward? Next slide.
Mr. Speaker, I think in Article 9, we are referring to a unique position in the Bangsamoro government. This is not equivalent, this is not the same as the Director General in the national level. But this is, as the nomenclature says, this is the Bangsamoro Director General. So it's a new position already created by the Ministry of Finance, Budget and Management. So therefore, the qualification standards would not be the same as that of the Director General in the national level, Mr. Speaker. So this is a unique position. This person will be the highest ranking career official of all the ministries.
MP Patoyan, do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, actually, my concern here, Mr. Speaker, is very simple. The National Civil Service used the word Director General to mean a qualification enumerated in there. But when it comes to BARM, by putting the word Bangsamoro, lessens, reduces the position that was established by the National Civil Service, Mr. Speaker.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this was already created and mentioned in the administrative code that the Parliament has passed earlier.
So this is in reference to the administrative code. What was used in the administrative code, similar with what is proposed in the civil service code. Am I correct, Minister?
Well,
Minister
it's a
Judy?
position that we created. There's already mention of it in the administrative code of the Bangsamoro. We are not precluded from creating our own positions, such as the Bangsamoro Director General. And this has been accepted by the Civil Service Commission, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Ampatuan, are you
Yeah,
clarified?
I just raised my concern, Mr.
Okay.
Speaker. That's my very simple interpretation of this specific provision, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. So we proceed with the next slide.
Yeah, it's a proposal,
Article
Mr. Speaker.
That's a proposal, proposed amendment.
Yeah.
Can we skip that? Maybe Minister Jajuri will reserve her response to this particular proposal, maybe later on in the period of amendment.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
So we skip this slide. We move to another slide.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Minister Jajuri.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. This is in reference also to Article 10.
May I request the ladies on the floor, maybe we can have a break, asar break, and then later on we will continue the deliberation.
Yes,
Okay?
Mr. Speaker.
With due respect. Thank you. Session is suspended for 30 minutes. We recognize Honorable Ampatuan to continue her deliberation. Minister Jajuri.
Uh, yes, Mr. Speaker, I think the reference to third level positions, uh, did it come from the draft or is it being proposed now?
No, it came from the draft.
Okay. In that case, Mr. Speaker, we'd like to manifest that the draft has some provisions referring to third level positions. But if we go to the minutes of the committee meeting, the intention was to take out third level references to third level positions such that there will still be three levels. One is first level, the other is second level, and the last is second level positions exercising executive or managerial functions. So this third level, if it appears in the draft, should actually be deleted, Mr. Speaker. So it was inadvertence on the part of the committee when it did not delete that part, because in the other section we made it clear that there will be three levels, and the third one is the second level positions exercising executive or managerial functions, and not third level.
MP
Mr.
Ampatuan,
Speaker.
are you clarified?
Mr. Speaker, may I clarify with the proponent, Mr. Speaker? If in the civil service law, there is such thing as second level executive managerial positions, Mr. Speaker?
That's our understanding, Mr. Speaker. Let me
May,
just go to the specific provision. This is actually taken from from that, Mr. Speaker. It comes from, I think, from Ora Ora and EO 292, which is the administrative code, book 5.
and Mr. Speaker, may I know what is the salary grade of second level executive managerial position, Mr. Speaker?
Second level executive. It's SG 26, Mr. Speaker. 10 to 26.
Mr. Speaker, in that case, Mr. Speaker, how do we reconcile it in the provision of the administrative code that the third level position is defined as anything above anything above division chief position, which is salary grade 24, Mr. Speaker.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. Second level positions would be SG 10 to 26. That excludes those who are exercising executive or managerial functions.
Mr. Speaker, may I request that it should be repeated, Mr. Speaker? I didn't get the point, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, may we also request Minister Jajuri to speak louder, perhaps closer to the microphone so we can hear her
Yes,
clearly.
Mr. Speaker. For second level positions, the salary grade would be SG 10 to 26. For second level positions exercising executive or managerial functions, the salary grade is 27 upwards, up to 32.
Mr. Speaker, that is based on Aura, Mr. Speaker.
Sorry?
Is that based on Aura?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. We just look. So, and let me just correct myself, Mr. Speaker. Second level positions would be SG 11 to 26 and not 10. Let me look at the SG, the second level with executive slash managerial functions.
Minister Jajiri, do you
Yes.
need time to collect your notes?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, can we just go back to that part of the issue regarding salary grade of second level with executive or managerial function?
Would you like MP Ampatuan to restate again her question?
I think the question is what is the salary grade of second level positions with executive or managerial functions? And
And-
that's what I'm looking for right now.
And Mr. Speaker, I have a follow-up question on that, Mr. Speaker. Based on Ora, how do we define third level position, Mr. Speaker?
Sandali lang po.
Again, do you need more time, Minister Jajuri, to collect your notes?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, session suspended for 1 minute.
Okay,
Mr. Jujuri.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we look at certain civil service resolutions and memorandum circular. So, um, in Civil Service Resolution number 100623, dated March 29, 2010, and Civil Service Commission Memorandum Circular 7, Series of 2010, uh, it clarified the guidelines as to the scope of the third level positions in the civil service. So it goes like this. One, the third level or career executive service shall only cover the positions of undersecretary, assistant secretary, bureau director, assistant bureau director, regional director, assistant regional director, chief of department service, and other officers of equivalent rank as may be identified by the Career Executive Service Board, all of whom are appointed by the President. And then number two, executive and managerial positions in the career service other than the foregoing shall belong to the second level. We also have Civil Service Commission Resolution number 1100472, promulgated on April 8, 2011. Also providing for adopting policies on executive/managerial positions in the second level that are non-presidential appointees. So, Mr. Speaker, essentially we're saying since there are no presidential appointees or career executive service positions where the appointees, the appointing authority is the president. Therefore, there is no third level position in the BARM. But we do make a distinction as to second level positions who are exercising executive or managerial functions and differentiating that from the other second level positions. So that's the basis, Mr. Speaker. Since while there is a law that we may say that there's a third level position, we agree that there is. But in the BARM, these positions do not exist. And therefore, we reflect what is the setup in the BARM, which is having second level positions exercising executive and managerial functions. And this category is also supported by the Civil Service Commission through the various issuances that I mentioned earlier, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I request the Secretariat to flash the second to the last slide, Mr. Speaker, because what was mentioned earlier was issuance on 2010 and issuance on April 2011. Second to the last slide, not that one. Next slide. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, if you try to look at the issuance of Career Executive Service Board, issued resolution number 945 dated June 14, 2011, and that actually is later than the April 2011 that was mentioned earlier. And it defines here, Mr. Speaker, that the following criteria to determine whether a position belongs to the Career Executive Service, Mr. Speaker. The position is career. The position is above division chief. The duties and responsibilities of the position require the performance of executive and managerial position, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think this is the latest issuance coming from the Civil Service Board, dated June 11, which is latest than what was cited earlier, which is 2010 and April 2011, Mr. Speaker. ang isang katanungan ko, Mr. Speaker, bakit natin iniiwasan na magkaroon ng third level eligibility kung napakaraming third level eligibility na naproduce ang Bangsamoro? Ang dami nating professionals who are competitive, ang dami nating magagaling, bakit hindi natin sila kailangang kunin? Mr. Speaker, hindi lahat ng tao ay pari-pareha dapat makuha ang posisyon. Yung third level eligibility ay nababagay at nararapat lamang doon sa may nakakuha ng third level na eligibility, Mr. Speaker. Hindi pwedeng pari-pareha, Mr. Speaker. Kaya nga nandito tayo sa mundo, hindi tayo binigyan ng pari-parehang kapalaran dahil bawat isa may kanya-kanyang nakalaan, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, those who sacrifice to get the third level eligibility, they deserve to be recognized, Mr. Speaker, more than the recognition that was enumerated in the Civil Service Code that we want to give bonuses, we want to give travel abroad. We need to recognize, Mr. Speaker, those third level eligibles that the Bangsamoro have produced over the years, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Jury, I believe this resolution cited in the slide preceded the one that you have read. Is it correct? Can you compare
Mr.
notes with the one that is flashed on the screen?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I made reference to Civil Service Commission issuances. And this one, I think, comes from the Career Executive Service Board.
So these two are different.
Okay.
so far
And
as the
even looking at this Career Executive Service Board Resolution number 945, I think there is a colatilia which is not reflected in the slide. So in paragraph 2, but in the same there are other memorandum circulars, Mr. Speaker, and there's jurisprudence as well on the matter, which is CLC versus Court of Appeals, categorically saying that the CES covers presidential appointees only. Yes. And in the same resolution of the Career Executive Service Board, I think before the enumeration, the opening paragraph says, for positions requiring presidential appointments other than those enumerated above. And therefore, these requirements are encompassed by that requirement, requirement that they are presidential appointees. There's also a memorandum circular coming from the Civil Service Commission dated 2016, also providing for or supporting the second level with managerial functions, Mr. Speaker.
Do you have a follow-up question?
Mr. Speaker, I just want to register, Mr. Speaker, that in the roster of civil servants, Mr. Speaker, a lot of Bangsamoro, male and female, have gained third level eligibility, residing or not residing within the BARM, Mr. Speaker. In that case, Mr. Speaker, are we not recognizing or are we not encouraging all those next in line to follow their footsteps? Mr. Speaker, we have built thousands of eligibles, third level eligible for that matter, Mr. Speaker. And I think we should really recognize them, Mr. Speaker, the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, the BOL should more and more recognize those who have exemplary achievements, Mr. Speaker. They are rare people, Mr. Speaker. Ang pinagtataka ko po, bakit sa BARM, Mr. Speaker, binaba natin yung standard natin. Nang sinabi natin noon na ang BARM ay dapat not less than ARM. Ang ARM noon, ang mga nanilbihan, mga seso. Mga seso po. Ngayon, wala na tayong i-recognize na seso. Nasaan tayo ngayon, Mr. Speaker? Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Do you have a response to that,
Yes,
Minister
Mr. Speaker, we are not saying that there are no CESO, eligibles who are CESO. In fact, we would want them all to join the Bangsamoro government. But this also came out of a conversation with the Civil Service Commission, Mr. Speaker, where the chairperson actually said that since there is no presidential appointee in the regular Bangsamoro government, then there should not be third level positions and there would not be any requirement for CESO eligibility. And then all the other circulars as well as the the Supreme Court decision also supports that position, Mr. Speaker. But I reiterate that if there are CESO eligibles who would want to be part of the Bangsamoro government, we would highly recommend them to join the Bangsamoro government. But to impose that minimum requirement is contrary to what the reality is in the BARM, where you do not have presidential appointees, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you very much, MP Ampatuan, for your questions and for your inquiries. We will take note of those questions in the presentation. Maybe proposal for amendments, we will take up those in the period of amendment. Again, thank you very much, MP Ampatuan. The next to interpolate is MP Rasmit Mag, the gentleman from Lambabayabao. You're recognized, sir.
Mr. Speaker,
Yes.
I would like to request that MP Teng Ambuluto take the floor before me. I will take it
So
after.
you yield your time to MP Ambuluto. The gentleman from Kabuntalan is recognized.
Just swapping, Mr. Speaker.
I'm sorry.
I'm just swapping my time places.
Okay, so the gentleman from Kabuntalan is recognized. After him, MP Rasul Mitmag. Please proceed, Deputy Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Madam Minister Raisa. Let me start with the question that were already initially raised by the other minority floor leader, the more able minority floor leader. Madam Minister, did we not consider classifying appointments, the positions to be appointed by our chief minister, being an autonomous government, that the positions, the appointments of which are reserved to the chief minister as third level? Kasi parang, okay, yun lang po muna.
Minister Jajuri.
We think that cannot be used as an argument to say that there should be third level positions. The president is definitely not the chief minister, and in the definition or in the different circulars and the Supreme Court decisions, what is clear to us is that for third level positions, they should be presidential appointees.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. So the minister is saying that, with categorically stating that in the civil service regime of the Philippines, only those appointed by the president, positions to which person appointment are reserved to the president can be classified. It means to say that the minister is saying that this parliament is prohibited from creating a class in our levels of civil service, the third level eligibility level, which is career executive service. Ibig sabihin po, pinagbabawal at hindi po pwede na gumawa po tayo ng third level. Ang sinasabi po ng ating minister, ang ating lapong kawani sa pamahalaan ay pang first level at second level lang po. Ganun po yung pagkakaintindi po natin.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, unless there's a different law or ruling regarding third level, the first statement is correct, Mr.
Yes.
Speaker.
So, Mr. Speaker, this is what we hold now. The proponents were simply limited, parang restricted from providing for a third level because of this understanding that only those positions whose appointment are reserved to the president can be classified as career executive service. Had it not been because of that, they would have recognized that there's an executive service in the Bangsamoro civil service. Ganun po yun.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, if that, okay na po yun. No? Bali, very, very categorical naman po yung pagkakasabi po ng ating proponent na dahil lamang po sa pagkakaintindi na yung mga appointed lang ng Pangulo ang pwedeng maging third level. Now, Mr. Speaker, I just want, maybe my last question. How remote, distant, or distinct is the career service system in the Bangsamoro from that of the autonomous region in Muslim Mindanao? Kasi yung autonomous region in Muslim Mindanao, meron na tayong malakas na consensus dyan. Unacceptable. And in fact, it was abolished, it was agreed to be abolished by the Comprehensive Agreement on the Bangsamoro. Ngayon po, dito po sa ating Civil Service Code, gaano po ito ka-distinct, remote, or different from the bureaucracy that was established under the autonomous region in Muslim Mindanao in 9054, originating from Republic Act 6734.
I think, Mr. Speaker, the difference is that in the ARMM, there was no civil service code. So this matter was not actually deliberated and discussed among members of the Legislative Assembly. There was no opportunity to look at the law, to look at the Civil Service Commission issuances and Supreme Court jurisprudence. So this time, we are asked to draft that and enact a civil service code. And therefore, we are now given that opportunity to look at the positions that are existing in the structure of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. So I think that's the difference between the BARM, where we are able to articulate and we are able to dissect and review what positions are existing in the structure. Whereas in the ARM, there was no civil service code and there was no discussion regarding this matter.
Mr. Speaker, in view of that, in view of the availability of that opportunity to review and discern the civil service regime that was in attendance during the defunct autonomous region in Muslim Mindanao, yung pong bang ating output ngayon, ito pong ating panukalang civil service code, nagbuo ba ng isang sistema na equal, na better, if not equal, than national standards, which is supposed to be the minimum standards in the governance of the autonomous region?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think we cannot go beyond what is existing. What positions are existing in our region? So even if we put third level positions there, I don't think it will pass the definition under national laws and under jurisprudence, so that it is not relevant to us and therefore should not be included in a Bangsamoro Civil Service Code. So I will not answer whether it's better or not, but I think our position is that it reflects the reality, it reflects the existing jurisprudence and laws on the matter of third level positions, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, yun nga lang po ang sinasabi po natin, given po that observation, pareho pa rin po pala yung ating civil service regime. The civil service laws that applies then will continue to be basically similar. The systems and processes will still be similar. Wala pong pinagbago yung civil service noon at yung civil service ngayon. Gawa ng sabi nga, ito yung parang
Well, I think, Mr. Speaker, that's premature. There are other provisions that are particular to BARM, and these are reflected in the draft, and this can be discussed later, Mr. Speaker.
final, Mr. Speaker. In the eligibility for second level positions, parang nakalagay po diyan sa provisions on the two positions that the eligibility for second level position, for entry to second level position, would be adequate for appointment to the rest of the second level positions within the bureaucracy. Would that mean po na yung ating let na eligibility be adequate for appointment to principals, and then the same pa rin po yung ating eligibility for appointment to supervisors, and then appointment to the superintendents. So, isang eligibility would apply to all positions within that circle of a level of career service. Ma'am, very specific po yung pagkalagay doon, Ma'am Minister, doon sa ating. And I think ang the only exception, specific exception to that would be yung provision natin kanina na nalagay sa Madaris. So are we saying now that we are doing away with the requirements for the eligibilities for principals, competency eligibility for principals, supervisors, and superintendents?
I think, Mr. Speaker, that when we look at the specific positions, even if they are all classified as second level, there would be different requirements, qualification standards, such that you may have a different qualification standard for teacher 1 and from a principal or a higher level position, but still within the same level of position, Mr. Speaker.
Do you have further, MP?
So last final, just to tighten that conversation, close that conversation. So what we're saying is that the principal, though the requirement, the eligibility, the examinations required for appointment as principals, supervisors, and superintendents remain. Yun po yung parang nasabi sa pagpaliwanag ng ating proponent, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, may I ask the interpellator to repeat the question?
MPM Buluto, you will restate again
Yes,
your
yung
question.
for purposes po ng appointments to principal, supervisors, and superintendents, yung necessary examinations for appointment to those positions, we are not doing away with those. There will still be those necessary qualifying examinations for appointment to those positions.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MPM Buluto. MP Rasmit Mag, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ang unang katanungan ko po, Mr. Speaker, is alam po natin yung Civil Service Commission. Meron silang ora-ora and it applies to all the regions. Sa BARM po, we were allowed to have our Civil Service Code. So ang tanong ko po, Mr. Speaker, yung ora-ora ba, ano yung relation niya sa Civil Service Code natin, sa Bangsamoro Civil Service Code? Tapos yung Bangsamoro, ito ba ay for the BARM, ito yung ora-ora natin? Or just a portion of it?
I think, Mr. Speaker, we are guided by the provision in the Bangsamoro Organic Law that the Civil Service Code that the Parliament shall pass should not be generally inconsistent with the Constitution, national laws, including ora-ora, and other issuances also of the Civil Service Commission, except when um, when there are specific provisions, and these specific provisions have been discussed with the National Civil Service Commission, where they define that in this area you have more leeway and you can have a special provision. But generally, the national laws would have to be the parameters within which our civil service code shall be enacted.
Mr. Speaker, after po noon, yung gusto ko po maintindihan is ano po yung mga specific areas where we can improve, add, or engage, or pwede tayo magdagdag para guided tayo for the whole code.
So, Mr. Speaker, there's that provision that was flashed earlier regarding Madaris teachers. So, we clarified in the Civil Service Code that qualification standards for Madaris teachers may be provided in the Education Code of the Bangsamoro. Since Madaris teachers, that position or some positions in Madaris education are not present in the other regions. So considering the unique situation or the situation and the structure of MBHTE, which also looks at Madaris education, the Civil Service Code provides that there can be a different set of standards, or that the Education Code shall provide for the qualification standards of Madaris teachers. So that's one concrete example of a provision that you may not find in the national civil service laws, Mr. Speaker.
Sa committee report po ba, Mr. Speaker, meron tayong list of those areas kung saan tayo pwede makapaglagay ng ano yung definitely BARM o ano yung autonomously BARM?
Well, we can call it out from the committee report, but I am not ready with the list right now, Mr. Speaker. We can look at it and provide the list in the next session, so that we can expedite today's proceedings.
Then, Mr. Speaker, I am very much interested in one key area. Sa BARM po kasi, isa sa mga provisions sa BOL kung saan medyo pinalawak ang autonomiya ay tungkol sa Sharia. Meron po tayong Sharia graduates. Then, isa po sa concern ng Sharia graduates is sa ora-ora. Dati, binigyan na sila ng resolution favorable to them. Then ngayon, paglabas ng ora-ora, iba po yung naging decision sa ora-ora. So sinabi naman po meron tayong leeways, and this would be those situation unique sa BARM. Kasama po ba yung Sharia dito? Kasi marami pong Sharia graduates ang lumalapit. Katulad po ng nasabi ni Deputy Minister Baintan kanina, anong pinagkaiba ng unang exam sa mga susunod na exam? So gusto ko lang po malaman, Mr. Speaker, if we have space for this na pwede tayo mag-propose in relation dito para sa ating Bangsamoro Civil Service Code.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the way we understood the provision of ora-ora referring to the Sharia counselors is that there is that line between the 13th Sharia bar examination and those that went after, that came after. And if we look at the history of Sharia bar examinations or the requirements for someone to take the Sharia bar examinations, there is a distinct difference between the Sharia bar examinations that were conducted uh, in 2014 and those that came after, or those between before January 14 and those that 2014 and those that came after that day. Prior to January 2014, the graduates need not be the examinees need not be graduates of any 4-year course. Whereas for those who took the exams or who can take the exams after January 2014, there was that requirement. So I think that is the rationale for Section 82, Rule 8 of the Ora provision on Sharia. So yes, it's the same exam, but as to the qualifications of the examinees, the educational attainment would be different between those who took it before January 2014 and those who took it after.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Then, Mr. Speaker, katulad po ni Deputy Minister Baintan, Deputy Minority Floor Leader Baintan, at ni Deputy Minority Floor Leader Teng Amuluto, interested din po ako dun sa third level positions. Pagkaintindi ko po sa level natin, it's known as the second level with managerial position. Ang question ko lang po, is there anything in the ora-ora that prevents us to accept yung CESO qualification para dun sa third level natin? Hindi ito sa pag-impose ng another requirement para sa mga tao. Kasi ang pagkaintindi ko po, yung region natin is like any other region. In fact, autonomous. It's supposed to be better. Pero kung si Presidente, nag-appoint po siya ng secretaries, then yung undersecretary niya is CESO. Si Chief Minister po natin will appoint an elected MP eventually as minister, then will eventually appoint ministers. Pero yung support po nila will not avail or will not have the training of those with CESO sa national. The same po yung region, magka-same level lang po sila. So ang question ko, pinagbabawal ba ng ora-ora yung pag-request natin? Maybe not now kasi nagsisimula tayo. Maybe after 5 years or 6 years, pag-establish na yung system, na makapaglagay tayo ng CESO requirement.
Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned earlier, the provision as it appears in the committee report reflects the situation on the ground. What positions have been created and are part of the structure of the Bangsamoro government. And definitely, we do not have the positions that would qualify or that can be categorized as third level. There are no presidential appointees, and therefore, we did not reflect that. But of course, if there are CESO eligibles who would want to be part of BARM, as I said, while we do not require that qualification, we do not also prohibit them from joining. And therefore, if there are those who are so qualified, there is nothing that will stop them from joining or from applying and being recruited to the BARM government or the bureaucracy.
So in
Mr.
other words,
Speaker.
there's no such thing as overqualified.
Yes,
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At ito po yung panghuli, Mr. Speaker. Dahil po next year will be an election year, sa October po is magpa-file tayo ng candidacy. Whether it be next year or on the 25th kasi nag-apply po tayo ng extension on the 2025. Yung BTA members po ba, if they file for candidacy or be nominated in a political party, will they be deemed resigned? Kasi meron pong provision sa CSC code po natin, Mr. Speaker.
Well, my legal consultant, our opinion is that it will apply, meaning it will be deemed resigned, but that's a personal opinion that can still be thoroughly discussed, I guess, among lawyers and other election practitioners.
Even for nominees of a political party, Mr. Speaker.
Except siguro yon.
Okay. Salamat po sa oras at sa clarification from our Deputy Majority Floor Leader. Salamat po, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Mr. Speaker.
MP Mitmag. We recognize MP Liza Alamia for her interpellation. Minority Leader Lamia, you're recognized. Secretariat, can we fix the Zoom connection?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to clarify if I can be heard.
Clearly, MP Alamia, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and to the Deputy Majority Floor Leader as the proponent of the for this particular bill. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to ask these questions for the purpose of understanding the intent and the spirit behind provisions that pertain to CES eligibility, third level eligibility in the BARM, which is found under the revised CSC code under Article 113. So this is so that we would understand, aside from the questions that were asked earlier, we would understand fully what is the intent of the proponent and the majority with respect to third level positions, Mr. Speaker. So to continue the questions, the line of questioning that were asked earlier by MP Baintan Ampatuan, MP Suharto Bolodo, and MP Ras Mitbug, my first question, Mr. Speaker, when the issue, the position of Director General in the ARMM, in the BARM, was raised earlier by the proponent, I would like to know, considering that this is a different Director General position, not similar to a Director General position of the national government, with different qualifications, I would like to know specifically what is the difference between the Director General position in the BARM and the Director General position in other parts of the country, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, let me just clarify that the position in the BARM is called Bangsamoro Director General. So the word Bangsamoro actually appears in the title of the position. So it's different from the Director General. It has a different salary grade, and there would be different qualification standards for that position compared to the national positions that are called Director General. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Specifically, I would like to know what is the difference with respect to the qualification standards. I would like to know what are the qualification standards for the Bangsamoro Director General as compared to the Director General as defined by civil service rules, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, we will have to check the specific qualification standards, Mr. Speaker, with respect to the Bangsamoro Director General. They also have a different appointing authorities, while the Bangsamoro Director General is appointed by the Chief Minister. In the case of the Director General, I think that position is a position where the President is the appointing authority. But we're still looking at the specific qualification standards in terms of education, training, and so forth, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, considering that the specific qualifications for the Bangsamoro Director General in the BARM could not be specified right now, is it safe to say that the QS for the Bangsamoro Director General is lower than the QS for the Director General position at the national level or at other regions, Mr. Speaker?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. As I mentioned earlier, it has a lower salary grade compared to the national position of Director General.
Mr. Speaker, my question pertains to qualification standards, not to the description of the position as to the salary grade or as to who is the appointing authority. The qualification standards are important because this will be the basis that will be used by the selection board, the selection and appointment screening board, who will choose who will be appointed in those positions. So I would like to repeat the question. Does this mean that the qualification standards which pertains to, for example, educational level, does it require a master's degree? The number of years of experience, the number of years of experience in a supervisory position, those are some elements of qualification standards, Mr. Speaker. So my question is, are
we
the
already
qualification standards for the Bangsamoro Director General lower than the Director General in the general sense?
Let me read the eligibility or the qualification standards required of the Bangsamoro Director General. As to education, bachelor's degree with appropriate RA 1080 for positions, the duties and responsibilities of which involve practice of profession. As to training, 120 hours of supervisory/management learning development intervention. For experience, 5 years of supervisory or managerial experience. And for eligibility, appropriate RA 1080, eligibility for positions involving practice of profession, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you for that, Mr. Speaker. So since those are the qualification standards for that particular position, would there be a difference in the opinion of the proponent? Would there be a difference in the quality of service delivery of someone occupying that position compared to someone who is occupying the Director General position in other regions and in other parts of the country?
Well, I cannot say exactly if there will be a difference in the quality of service, but they do have different.
Alamia, are you using your phone? Is your phone near your laptop? Are you texting?
Not my phone, Mr. Speaker. No, there is another phone, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, because we hear feedbacks in the plenary, so perhaps you can put away your phone for a while, MP Alamia, so it will not create feedback.
Apologies, Mr. Speaker. I had the phone removed already.
Thank you very much. Minister Jajuri, please continue with your response.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. So I would think that there would be a different and higher qualification standards for the national position of Director General compared to the Bangsamoro Director General, Mr. Speaker, if that is the question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In that case, Mr. Speaker, the only difference, the difference between the Bangsamoro Director General is the term Bangsamoro, and that differentiates it from the term Director General as described in the compendium of position classification of the Department of Budget and Management, which
think-
also provides for different qualification standards, Mr. Speaker.
So I think the qualification standards for the national position of Director General would be higher compared to the qualification standards for the position of the Bangsamoro Director General. So there is a difference, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Considering that, I would like to proceed to the general meaning of what is the general intent of Article 113 of the Bangsamoro Civil Service Code, which does not apply only to the Bangsamoro Director General position. May I know, and I would like to read under Article 113, it says, third level eligibility. The requirement for career executive service eligibility shall not apply to third level position in the BARM unless otherwise provided by law or existing jurisprudence. Earlier, it was explained, Mr. Speaker, that there are no third level positions in the BARM as drafted in the draft of the Civil Service Code for BARM. But there is this particular provision which talks about third level position, which is found under the Ora and the Civil Service Law and Rules, Mr. Speaker. So I would like to know, what is the reason for Article 113? Why are we saying that the requirement for CES eligibility shall not apply to third level positions in the BARM? I would like to understand what is the reason why we will not apply the CES eligibility requirement for third level positions, Mr. Speaker.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I mentioned earlier that there are certain provisions that were inadvertently retained, and this is one of them. The matter of the three levels of positions was actually introduced during the committee hearing, and thereafter there was a resolution coming from the committee backtracking and saying that there should not be any third level eligibility, and that the third position should be second level position with managerial and executive functions. Unfortunately, that provision did not translate into all the other provisions or the other articles that had reference to a third level eligibility. So this provision, if there would be an amendment so that we can be consistent, should read this way: the requirement of career executive service eligibility shall not apply to second level positions exercising or second level positions with managerial or executive functions unless otherwise provided by law or existing jurisprudence. That should be the case, Mr. Speaker. It was inadvertence on the part of the committee, the one that prepared the committee report, when it did not amend this provision in accordance with the provision that provided for the three levels, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So it is very clear that the career executive service eligibility shall not apply to second level managerial positions. Actually, Mr. Speaker, it does not apply even in other parts of the country. If it is a second level position, it does not apply. Considering that this has been clarified, that Article 113 should be read as that, second level positions. However, the code is silent with respect to third level positions. I would like to understand now, to be clarified now, Mr. Speaker, what happens now to the current third level positions in the BARM? How are they going to be treated if the Civil Service Code will only talk about second level positions that have managerial functions, Mr. Speaker?
As I mentioned, Mr. Speaker, in the ARMM, there was no opportunity to discuss this. But if we look at the definition of third level positions, which would require appointment by the President, that provision will not apply in the ARMM or in the BARM. And this is why we took it out, no, and provided only for second level positions. So in effect, those who were categorized as third level would now be reflected as second level positions exercising executive or managerial functions, since they
That
are
is
not
very, thank you.
presidential appointees.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So then it becomes clearer now. That means those who have been occupying throughout their whole career the permanent positions, like the superintendents and the assistant superintendents and other positions, other employees handling third level positions in the defunct ARMM, who were occupying third level positions, their appointments will now be their positions, and therefore their appointments will now be downgraded, Mr. Speaker, to second level position, Mr. Speaker. I would like to be clarified about that.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if we look at the situation, even during the ARMM, that requirement for career executive service eligibility, it is clearer. It is clearly a requirement for district superintendent, SDS, because their schools division superintendent. Precisely because there's jurisprudence requiring such eligibility for that position. And hence, this provision will still apply if we change the third level position in the Article 113 and make it second level position, because there's an exception. And the exception says, unless otherwise provided by law or existing jurisprudence. So that is still captured. We will still require that eligibility from for schools, district superintendent, because the Supreme Court said so, and that's an exception, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you for clarifying that and for pointing that out, Mr. Speaker, because I don't have to establish that. There was a decision of the Supreme Court in the case of Pangandaman versus Belgado Saqueton under CAGR SP number 0234 and Attorney Anacleto Buena versus Dr. Sangkad Benito dated October 2014, which reached the Supreme Court, and upon which the Supreme Court en banc has given its decision. And they stated, the Supreme Court has declared that for the positions of the position of superintendent, schools division superintendent, and assistant school superintendent are third level positions and therefore require third level eligibility, which is equal to the career executive service eligibility. However, if we look at the decision, Mr. Speaker, That this decision, which is now considered by the proponent, by the majority, as an exception to Article 113, because this was decided by the Supreme Court, that decision means that even for third level positions as the division superintendent and assistant school division superintendent, the civil executive, the career executive service eligibility is required, even if these positions are not appointed by the president, Mr. Speaker, which leads to the point that the requirement that the position is appointed by the president is not included in the very intent of why there is what we call career executive in the civil service, Mr. Speaker. The career executive service is the third level or managerial class in career positions. It is the highest level of career civil service in the position, classification, and compensation system of the government. And scholars have long noted the critical role that they play in the system of governance. It is not the appointing power, Mr. Speaker, but it is the qualifications themselves, Mr. Speaker, the QS for a third level position, Mr. Speaker. If we do not have, therefore, third level positions in the BARM, that requires those qualification standards with respect to managerial competency, experience, and education level, and passing an eligibility process that includes an exam, an interview, and an assessment of the capability of the appointee to handle functions that require his managerial skills. If this will not apply in the BARM, what then will be the qualification standards for third level positions? And the second level position, that is a new classification now in the bar, the second level position with managerial functions, what will be the basis then with respect to qualification standards for hiring and appointment to these positions, Mr. Speaker?
Well, Mr. Speaker, first of all, our position that third level positions are those where the appointing authority is the president, is also taken from a Supreme Court decision. So it did not come out of nothing. So it's also being compliant or following the ruling of the Supreme Court.
Mr. Speaker, just with due respect, may I know what is the date of that Supreme Court decision? And did it come earlier or later than the decision of the Supreme Court with respect to third level eligibility of schools division superintendent, assistant schools division superintendent? Before proceeding, Mr. Speaker, I would just like to be clarified on that.
The case law is from Civil Service Commission. Sorry. Civil Service Commission versus Court of Appeals and the Philippine Charity Sweepstakes Office, which is dated or promulgated in November 2010. And also incorporated in the Civil Service Commission resolution number 11-00472, promulgated in April 2011, Mr. Speaker.
So just before the proponent will proceed, Mr. Speaker, I would just like to point that out. These are the decisions and resolutions that came prior to the latest decision of the Supreme Court with respect to CES eligibility. The proponent may proceed, Mr. Speaker.
Again, Mr. Speaker, with respect to qualification standards, as we mentioned earlier, Each position provides for its own set of qualification standards in terms of education, training, experience, as well as eligibility, Mr. Speaker. So there are enough we are assured with these qualification standards that the person to be appointed would have the qualifications, the skills, the knowledge, the experience in handling the positions that they are applying for, Mr. Speaker.
MP Alamia, are you clarified? Do you have further questions?
I have further questions, probably last one or two questions, Mr. Speaker, because I would really like to understand the spirit behind this act of not including third level positions in our civil service code. So since it is very clear based on the pronouncements of the proponent that our Bangsamoro Civil Service Code, number one, will not talk about third level positions. That is very clear. And therefore, it will not require, or it will skirt away from the responsibility of requiring career executive service eligibility for third level positions. That's the first point, Mr. Speaker, which is very clear. Third level positions will not be mentioned and will not be defined in the Civil Service Code of the Bangsamoro. Second, it's also clear that there is a new classification of position in the BARM that will be created, and that is the second level position with managerial function, which is totally unique. It is unique, and there is no such position in other parts of the country. Third, Mr. Speaker, considering this and considering that the proponent has said that the intent for this, the spirit for this position is because of the situation on the ground. But the situation on the ground, Mr. Speaker, also says that there are Moro Muslim professionals who are qualified and have reached third level eligibility, not just inside the BARM, but even outside the BARM, and occupying career executive positions up to CESO 1. That is the situation also on the ground, Mr. Speaker. If this is the case, Mr. Speaker, is there a possibility to reconcile these positions, while we would want, on the one hand, to make sure, because we are just starting, that there are more among the Moros who will be able to enter the civil service, will be able to enter public service. At the same time, we try to reconcile it also with the principle of recognizing the efforts of Moro professionals who are qualified and have reached third level eligibility based on their experience and education. Is there a way of reconciling these two intents, Mr. Speaker? So we give way to those who would want to be appointed but could not be appointed because of their lack of qualification. But at the same time, we also recognize the fact on the ground that there are Moro professionals among us, and there are many of us who are Moro professionals who have reached third level eligibility. I'm asking that question, this rhetorical question, Mr. Speaker, because there is a way of actually doing that, Mr. Speaker, without removing the requirement under the civil service rules, which is provided even in the Bangsamoro Organic Law under Section 39 of the article on the executive offices, Mr. Speaker. that says that under the civil service, the Bangsamoro government shall enact a civil service law. That's a general rule, provided that it shall be in accordance with existing national laws, and that in case of conflict with the national laws, the Constitution, and existing national civil service laws, rules, and regulations shall prevail. So considering that it will be the civil service rules at the national level, jurisprudence by the highest court of the land, the Supreme Court, that will prevail, and the Constitution, I believe there is a way to reconcile this seemingly divergent intent, Mr. Speaker. We can provide for a second level positions with managerial functions those positions can be created, Mr. Speaker. But at the same time, we do not degrade or lower the third level eligibility for third level positions, Mr. Speaker. Would the proponent be open to that, Mr. Speaker, if we are able to come up with a provision that will allow for the creation and appointment to positions that are considered second level with managerial positions and third level positions that require career executive service eligibility, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, may I just clarify that the category of second level position that are categorized as executive or managerial is not new. We have already cited earlier the different circulars and references that make reference to the second level position that exercising executive or managerial functions, including, for example, the policies on executive/managerial positions in the second level. That is the title of the resolution, Mr. Speaker, of the Civil Service Commission. So this is not new, but we think that it reflects what is the fact on the ground. And the fact on the ground is there are no third level positions. Maybe we have that in the national level where certain positions are appointed by the president and have higher qualification standards. But that is not the case in the BARM. So actually that provision will not apply to us and is not should not be the basic requirement for certain positions. But as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Speaker, this is not to say that there are no CES eligibles in the BARM. And in fact, as I mentioned earlier, as I emphasized earlier, if we have more of them in the BARM government, then that would be truly beneficial to the delivery of services by the BARM and the whole bureaucracy, the quality of bureaucracy as a whole. So,
Mr.
just to
Speaker.
reiterate that we are not taking it out because we do not want CES eligibles to be in the BARM, but we are saying that there are no third level positions in the BARM, and therefore we are reflecting what is actually there, what are the positions that have been created in the bureaucracy of the Bangsamoro government.
Thank you. For a while,
Mr. Speaker, the last question, Mr. Speaker, just to so that we can end this, Mr. Speaker, because my question was it was long winding. If I can break it down, considering that stand of the proponent, Mr. Speaker, that there are no third level positions in the BARM. Therefore, despite the decision of the Supreme Court, Mr. Speaker, are the positions for Division School Superintendent and Assistant Schools Division School Superintendent not third level positions, Mr. Speaker, I'm just breaking down the very long question that I had earlier, Mr. Speaker.
As we mentioned, Mr. Speaker, the jurisprudence, which requires school division superintendent to have CES eligibility, still stands. As we mentioned earlier in reference to Article 113, that there may be positions which is an exception to the general rule. And this
So
is
there
actually-
are apologies, Mr. Speaker, to cut off the proponent. So there are third level positions, Mr. Speaker, in the BARM.
based on the jurisprudence, that is what it says. But the effect on us is that whether it's third level or second level, which is our position, the requirement for CES eligibility is recognized by this provision, Mr. Speaker.
Well, I'm
Thank
sorry
you,
for
Mr. Speaker.
So no more
Um,
questions from you, MP Alamia?
Yes, Mr.
No more
Speaker, just to wind this up, Mr. Speaker. So considering that, Mr. Speaker, there are exceptions to the rule. My position is there is no problem for recognizing and creating something that is already recognized at the national level, the second level executive or managerial position that does not require career executive service eligibility. So I'm fine with that. That means the BARM can actually create those positions in the plantilla positions. But if we do that, Mr. Speaker, and I think creating those positions in the plantilla, in the career, in the service, does not preclude the existence of third level positions, Mr. Speaker. They do not go against each other, Mr. Speaker. They do not go against each other. So there can be second level positions that have managerial or executive functions, and there could be third level positions such as the division school superintendent. It does not go against each other. And in fact, we can actually go to the point where the only third level positions are the division school superintendent and assistant schools division superintendent, if that is the intent of the proponents, Mr. Speaker. So there is no contradiction between creating second level positions with executive managerial functions with a lesser qualification standard than a third level position and maintaining the current third level positions such as the division school superintendent. Mr. Speaker, that is my stand, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to know if the proponents are open to that, considering that there is a Supreme Court decision and it is also recognized by the proponents that you can actually have second level positions with managerial functions. At the same time, we also recognize that there are existing third level positions such as the division school superintendent and assistant schools division superintendent, Mr. Speaker.
For a while, I hate to interrupt this productive exchange between the minority leader and Minister Jajuri. Will we know if that is the last point of the good minority leader, or does she need more time because we can continue this tomorrow? It's already 5:30, and perhaps if the good minority leader would be her last question, we can allow the minister, Minister Jajuri to respond. We would know if that's the last her last point. MP Amalamia, would that be your last point?
With respect to CES eligibility, Mr. Speaker, that is my last point, Mr. Speaker. I would just like to reconcile the seemingly opposite positions, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
That's my last question for that particular issue.
Yes, because we can provide further time for other interpellators. Perhaps we can also accommodate MP Alamia if she has other questions tomorrow. MP,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, my Minister Raisa Jajuri is
Well,
recognized.
I think, Mr. Speaker, we have already explained why we think there should not be any third level positions, considering the facts on the ground. And that is the statement right now, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much for that. Again, these are the, if there are members who would like to interpolate MP Satar and MP Mawalil, please register your names. You can submit your names to the secretariat. We hate not to accommodate you today.
Yes,
But
Mr.
unfortunately,
Speaker.
because of the time constraint, we will resume the period of debate tomorrow, and we will accommodate you. Plus, submit your names to the secretariat for your proper acknowledgement tomorrow.
Mr. Speaker,
Majority Leader, yes.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, may we call the members of the parliament na kung yung sa inyo ay kaya namang ayusin sa period of amendment, ay doon na lang po natin dalhin sa period of amendment. Kung yung questions o clarificatory questions niyo ay meron kayong proposal na amendment, again, pakiusap ko sa majority block na doon na lang po sa period of amendment.
So if you
Yes,
so
Mr. Speaker.
if you have proposals for amendment, you go directly to the period of amendment.
Yes, Mr.
Majority
Speaker.
Leader.
Yes, I move to suspend this session until tomorrow at 1:30 in the afternoon.
Session suspended until tomorrow at 1:30 in the afternoon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh.
Alaikum assalam. Very good exchange.